Hello there. It's so good to see you. Come on in. I want to tell you a little story about this place.
The night Blackridge lost power, the only building still breathing was the one everyone had laughed at. This story is about why quiet preparation, practical compassion, and refusing to give up on a broken place can save more lives than pride ever will. By the time Nora Bennett came back to Blackridge, the town had already made up its mind about itself. It was the kind of small Rust Belt town people used to talk about with pride, then with pity, and finally not at all. The old machine shop had closed. The grocery store cut its hours every other month. Half the storefronts on Main Street had hand-painted signs sun-bleached almost white. And the Marigold Theater, which had once been the heart of Saturday nights, stood at the end of the block like a memory no one knew what to do with. Its marquee was cracked. Its velvet seats had mildewed. Its front doors stuck in damp weather. Teenagers dared each other to throw rocks at the side windows. Older folks still slowed down when they passed it, but only for a second, like looking too long might hurt. So when Nora bought it, people noticed. Not because Blackridge was the kind of town where bold moves still happened, but because it wasn't. Nora Bennett was 39, drove an old Ford pickup with a dented tailgate, and wore the same brown work boots every day for the first 2 weeks she was back. She didn't arrive with much: a few toolboxes, 2 metal shelves, a rolled mattress, 3 plastic tubs of clothes, a red gas can, a folded ladder tied down with frayed rope, no husband, no kids, no smile that invited questions. She parked in front of the theater on a Monday morning just after 9, stepped out into the summer heat, stared up at the faded sign, and stood there long enough for 3 different people to pretend not to watch. Then she unlocked the front doors and disappeared inside. By noon, half the block knew. By dinner, the whole town did. "Poor thing," Mrs. Pritchard muttered at the diner, topping off coffee no one had asked for. "Must be going through something." "Going through something?" Dale Harper snorted from the counter stool. "She bought a dead theater in a dead town? That's not going through something. That's giving up with paperwork." A few people laughed. June Holloway, who owned the diner and had lived long enough to distrust easy opinions, said nothing at all. That was the way with Blackridge. People could smell trouble, weakness, bad luck, and private grief from 2 blocks away. And Nora, whether she meant to or not, carried all 4. She had grown up there. Left at 19. Worked years in Chicago doing stage rigging, lighting, maintenance, anything backstage that kept a show running without the audience ever seeing the hands behind it. Then life, in the way it sometimes does, had taken a hard swing. A marriage that wore thin in silence. A job lost in a budget cut no one saw coming. A city apartment that stopped feeling like shelter and started feeling like a waiting room for a future that never arrived. So she came back to the one place she once promised herself she would never need again. And instead of buying a little house on the edge of town like everyone expected, she bought the Marigold. That alone would have been enough to make people talk. But within days, the talking changed. Because Nora wasn't cleaning it up to sell. She wasn't restoring it for tourists. She wasn't turning it into a wedding venue, a brewery, or some cute downtown dream for people with money and hobbies. She was gutting it. She hauled out rotten seats. She pulled moldy carpet. She measured walls, vents, storage closets, and the slope of the basement stairs. She had pallets of bottled water delivered to the alley. A used industrial fan came in on a trailer. Then another. Then a squat diesel generator that took 4 men to unload. "Now that," Dale Harper said, standing across the street with his thumbs hooked in his belt, "is how you know somebody's lost it." From the sidewalk, Eli Turner watched Nora guide the generator inch by inch into the side entrance with a pry bar, a floor jack, and the kind of patience most grown men in town didn't have. Eli was 16, skinny as a fence post, and knew more about everybody's business than he should thanks to his paper route and his habit of listening while adults forgot he was there. He also knew one other thing. Nora Bennett didn't move like a woman who was lost. She moved like a woman following a plan no one else could see. Every morning, she unlocked the theater before the sun got mean. By lunch, sweat darkened the back of her gray t-shirt. By evening, the sidewalk outside the Marigold was lined with broken lumber, old plaster, dead wiring, torn curtain fabric, and rusted seat frames stacked in neat piles. Inside, the place slowly changed. Not prettier, not softer, stronger, more useful. She cleared the lobby first, then the backstage rooms, then the lower level, where the air stayed several degrees cooler than the street above. She reinforced shelves, checked drains, tested outlets, covered cracked windows from the inside, installed blackout curtains in rooms nobody had used in 20 years. People asked what she was doing. Nora rarely answered more than she had to. Fixing it up, getting it ready, making it work. That last one bothered folks the most. Making it work for what? Blackridge was used to things dying in public. Factories, church attendance, marriages, stores, dreams. But there was something unsettling about watching one quiet woman work like she believed something could still be saved. One evening, June Holloway carried a takeout container across the street just before closing time. She found Nora sitting on the edge of the stage, eating crackers for dinner in the dim light of a clamp lamp. June handed over the container without ceremony. "Meatloaf," she said. "Before you insult yourself with those." Nora looked up surprised. "Thank you." June glanced around the theater, at the fan parts, the extension cords, the labeled bins, the cases of water tucked against the far wall. Then she looked back at Nora. "You planning to tell people what all this is?" Nora set the crackers aside. "No." June lifted an eyebrow. "Why not?" Nora looked toward the dark rows where the audience used to sit. Because if she said it out loud, it would become a debate. And because she was too tired to argue with people who mistook denial for strength. But what she said was simpler. "They won't believe me yet." June studied her for a moment, then nodded once, as if that answer told her more than a longer one would have. Outside, the air still held the heat long after sunset. Inside, the old theater hummed softly with the sound of work not finished yet. And in a town that had stopped expecting foresight from anybody, Nora Bennett kept building towards something no one else was ready to see. By the second week, people in Blackridge had stopped asking what Nora Bennett was doing inside the Marigold Theater. That did not mean they had stopped watching. It only meant that they had moved on to something they liked better: guessing. In Blackridge, guessing was practically a local sport. Some said she was turning the place into storage. Some said she was building one of those survival bunkers people joked about online. Dale Harper swore she was fixing to sell the copper wiring and disappear before winter. Mrs. Pritchard said Nora looked worn out but determined, which in that town could mean anything from respectable to unstable. And through all of it, Nora kept working. Every morning, just after sunrise, she unlocked the side door. Every evening, long after Main Street had gone quiet, a work light still glowed behind the theater's dusty windows. The Marigold was changing. Not in the romantic way people like to imagine when they talked about old buildings getting a second life. It was not becoming charming. It was becoming ready. Nora stripped the backstage rooms down to the studs where the walls had gone soft with age. She patched water damage. She sealed cracks. She tested every vent shaft in the building and mapped which ones still pulled air and which ones were dead. She cleaned the lower level herself, one heavy bucket at a time, scrubbing away years of mildew, plaster dust, and stale neglect until the concrete floor showed through again. Then she brought in cots, foldable ones, military style, practical and plain. She stacked bottled water by the wall in careful rows. She labeled plastic bins with black marker, flashlights, batteries, first aid, cooling towels, non-perishables. Nothing about it looked panicked. That was the strangest part. If she had seemed frantic, maybe people would have understood her better. But Nora was methodical, steady, quiet. She moved through the building like someone who had already run the disaster in her head 100 times and was now simply making sure the real version would go smoother. One afternoon, Eli Turner showed up with a sack of fast food fries and a soda balanced on top. He found Nora in the basement, standing on a ladder, fastening a vent cover back into place. "You forgot lunch again," he said. Nora looked down at him. "I didn't forget, I postponed." Eli grinned. "That's just a smarter way to say forgot." She climbed down, wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist, and accepted the fries. By then, he had started helping often enough that neither of them needed to explain it. He swept, carried boxes, sorted extension cords, ran to the hardware store when Nora needed bolts, duct tape, or furnace filters. He asked questions too, not in the nosy way adults did, in the honest way kids sometimes still can. "What are the cots for?" "In case people need to stay overnight." "What people?" "Whoever needs to." Eli shifted his weight. "You really think it's gonna get that bad?" Nora looked past him toward the basement ceiling, as if she could see through the wood, plaster, and brick into the bright hot sky above town. "I think people get comfortable right up until the minute comfortable stops working." That stayed with him, especially because she did not say it dramatically. She said it like she was talking about the weather. A day later, June Holloway came over from the diner carrying a box full of old but clean pillowcases and hand towels. She set them down in the lobby and looked around. The front of the theater still looked rough. Dusty floors, scuffed walls, a torn poster frame hanging crooked near the ticket booth. But the chaos from the first week was gone. Now the building felt organized, deliberate, the kind of order that made a person think there was a purpose behind every little thing. June turned slowly, taking it all in. "You planning for a church group?" she asked. "Or the end of the world?" Nora gave the smallest hint of a smile. "Neither." June crossed her arms. "That usually means both." Nora did not answer. She bent to lift the box, but June kept one hand on it for a second, stopping her. "I heard the power flickered again out on County Road." Nora nodded once. "It did. And the nursing home lost air for almost an hour yesterday." Another nod. June let go of the box. Now they were getting closer to the truth. Not all the way there, but close enough to feel it. That evening, a county utility truck parked out front. Deputy Cal Mercer stepped out with a clipboard in one hand and sunglasses pushed up on his head. He was the kind of man people trusted because he spoke slowly and kept his shirt tucked in, even in August. He was not cruel, but he had the tired face of a man who spent too much time cleaning up after other people's bad decisions. Nora met him in the lobby. "Afternoon," he said. "Afternoon." He glanced at the stacked supplies, then at the extension cords running neatly along the wall. "We got a call." "From who?" He gave a half shrug. "Somebody concerned." "Concerned about what?" Cal looked around again. "Generator, fuel cans, medical supplies." Folks see a woman stockpiling in an old theater. They start building their own story. Nora folded her arms. "And what story did they build?" His expression did not change. "That you might be getting ready for trouble." Nora let out one quiet breath through her nose. "I am." Cal paused. The answer landed harder than he expected. He looked at her for a long moment, waiting for a joke that never came. Then he followed her as she walked him through the building. She showed him the generator hookups, the backup fans, the battery-powered lanterns, the cots downstairs, the water, the first aid corner, the lower rooms where the temperature stayed cooler even in the late afternoon heat. She explained everything simply without trying to impress him. No speeches, no fear-mongering, just facts. "This town's grid is old," she said. "These houses trap heat. A lot of people here can't afford backup power, hotel rooms, or repairs on short notice." Cal said nothing. He thought of the older folks living alone on fixed incomes, of trailers out by the highway with weak window units and bad insulation, of the nursing home, of families too proud to ask for help until asking got harder than suffering. When the tour ended, they stood near the stage in a patch of dim light coming through the high windows. Cal looked around the room one more time. "This isn't crazy," he said at last. "No," Nora replied. "No," he repeated, softer this time. "It's not." Outside, the heat sat over Blackridge like a heavy hand. Inside the Marigold, something else was taking shape. Not comfort, not safety yet, but the structure of it, the possibility. And for the first time, someone besides Eli and June had seen it clearly enough to stop laughing. By the third week of July, the heat had stopped feeling temporary. It no longer felt like summer. It felt personal. The kind of heat that pressed against windows before noon. The kind that turned steering wheels into punishment and made front porches sit empty even in towns where people usually found reasons to stay outside. In Blackridge, the air had gone still. No breeze down Main Street, no relief after sunset, just a white, punishing sun all day, and heavy heat at night that clung to walls, rooftops, and skin like something alive. The weather report out of Toledo said the heat index could push past 106, then 108, then maybe higher. By then, folks had started checking the forecast the way people check hospital monitors, quietly, more often than they wanted to admit. At June Holloway's diner, the lunch crowd thinned out. Nobody wanted hot coffee. Nobody wanted meatloaf. People came in for iced tea, sat too long, and talked in low voices about transformers, old air conditioners, and the way the power had blinked 3 times on the west side the night before. "Grid can't take much more." Yeah, one man muttered into his glass. Dale Harper, who always spoke like confidence was a substitute for evidence, shook his head. "We get hot spells every year." June wiped down the counter. "Not like this." Nobody argued with her because everybody could feel it, even the people still pretending not to. Across town, Nora Bennett kept working inside the Marigold. But now her movements carried a sharper urgency. The cots were unfolded. The water stations were fully arranged. The battery lanterns were tested twice. She moved through the lower level with a clipboard in hand, checking fan placement, extension runs, first aid supplies, and the extra inhalers Cal had quietly brought over from the clinic after asking the right people the right questions. Eli followed close behind, sweat darkening the collar of his t-shirt. "You think tonight?" he asked. Nora did not look up from the list. "I think soon." That answer settled over him, heavier than a yes. She had not become more emotional as the danger got closer. If anything, she became calmer. That was what unnerved him. It was the calm of someone who had already made peace with the fact that nobody would move until moving became necessary. That afternoon, Tessa Reed's little boy had trouble breathing. His name was Micah, 7 years old, thin shoulders, big eyes, the kind of child who tried to be brave because he could feel how tired his mother already was. Tessa lived in a duplex near the railroad tracks where the insulation had been bad for years, and the window unit rattled like it was coming apart from the inside. By 2 o'clock, it gave out. By 3, the apartment felt like a slow oven. Tessa carried Micah to the clinic with one hand on his back and worry written all over her face. The waiting room was already full. An older man with flushed cheeks, a pregnant woman fanning herself with a folded church bulletin, a toddler crying against her grandmother's shoulder. The nurse behind the desk looked kind but exhausted. They were doing what they could. Everybody was. It just wasn't enough. When Nora heard, she loaded a cooler, 2 cooling towels, a box fan, and one of the portable battery packs into her truck and drove straight over. Tessa met her at the apartment door, damp hair stuck to her temples, fear making her voice thin. "I can't pay you," she said before anything else. Nora handed her the towels. "I didn't ask." Inside, Micah lay on the couch with his inhaler clutched in his hand. Nora set up the fan, plugged it into the battery unit, and placed the cooler within reach. Then she knelt so the boy did not have to look up to answer her. "You like movies, Micah?" He gave the smallest nod. "What kind?" "Space ones." "Good," Nora said, "because I know a place with a basement cooler than this apartment and a screen big enough for aliens." Micah almost smiled. Tessa did not. Worked in. Not yet. Her pride was still fighting her fear. "You mean the theater?" "Yes." Tessa hesitated. Everybody in town knew about the theater now. The supplies, the generator, the cots, the strange, stubborn woman who had been preparing for something no one wanted to name. Going there would mean admitting Nora had been right. It would mean stepping across that invisible line between polite skepticism and need. For a few seconds, the room held nothing but the fan and Micah's breathing. Then Tessa asked quietly, "If I come, is it just us?" Nora looked at her with steady, unembarrassed honesty. No, that mattered, because this was not charity for one family. It was shelter for whoever would need it. By early evening, the sky had taken on that pale metallic color it sometimes gets before trouble. Not storm clouds, something worse. A tired sky over a tired town running out of margin. On County Road, the nursing home lost air conditioning for 43 minutes before backup kicked in. On the west side, 2 homes lost power altogether. At the diner, June started filling extra water jugs without being asked. And out in front of the Marigold, Eli stood on a stepladder, taping a handwritten sign inside the glass of the front door. "Cooling center if needed." He stepped back to read it, then glanced through the dusty reflection at Nora moving inside, checking one last row of lanterns. Across the street, a few people noticed. Nobody laughed this time. They just looked and kept looking, because the whole town could feel it now. That thin, trembling moment before ordinary life gives way. That moment when pride starts to loosen, when assumptions begin to crack, when people stop asking whether someone is overreacting and start hoping quietly that maybe somebody was ready before the rest of them were. The power failed at 8:17 p.m. Not with a bang, not with sparks, just a hard, sudden silence. One moment, Blackridge was humming along on habit and strain. The next, every porch light, kitchen bulb, television screen, and window unit in town went dark at once. Then came the sound that always follows a real outage in a small town. Not noise at first, confusion. A few voices out on the street, a screen door slamming, someone saying, "Oh, come on." Then from farther off, a child crying. By 8:20, the heat inside people's homes had already started turning mean. Without fans, without air conditioning, without that little bit of movement, folks barely noticed until it was gone. The houses held the day's heat like brick ovens. Bedrooms turned stifling. Living rooms turned breathless. And over all of it sat that thick July air, unmoving and merciless, pressing down on the whole town like a wet hand. At the Reed duplex, Micah had started wheezing again. Tessa stood in the dark kitchen with her phone light on, trying to keep her own breathing steady so she would not scare him more. His inhaler helped, but not enough. Not in that heat, not with the apartment turning hotter by the minute. Across town, June Holloway was already locking the diner freezer and filling coolers from habit before the ice melted into useless water. At the nursing home, the backup system stuttered, caught, then dropped one wing again. On the west side, a man named Raymond Pike sat alone in his recliner with 2 oxygen tanks and no idea how long the battery would last. And at the Marigold Theater, Before half the town had even accepted the outage was real, Nora Bennett reached over and started the generator. The engine kicked once, twice, then caught with a deep mechanical growl that rolled through the old building like a promise. A few emergency lights came on first, then the lobby lamps, then the fans in the lower level. Not bright, not pretty, but enough. Enough to turn fear into direction. Eli was already there. He had come by after dinner to help check the water stations one last time, and now he stood in the lobby, staring at the lights with a look that was half amazement, half dread. Nora did not waste a second. "Open the front doors," she said. He moved. "Turn the sign around." He did. The handwritten poster in the glass now faced the street plain as day. "Cooling center open." Nora grabbed the flashlight, the intake list, and the ring of keys for the lower level. "Get June on the phone if you can," she said, "and call Cal." Outside, people were beginning to step onto porches. You could feel the town trying to understand itself, trying to decide whether this was a short inconvenience or the beginning of something worse. Then somebody across the street saw the glow coming through the Marigold's front windows. A minute later, somebody else did. By the time Deputy Cal Mercer pulled up, the first two families were already standing outside the theater, unsure whether to knock or just walk in. Cal got out fast. He took one look at the lights, the fans, the open doors, and Nora standing calm in the lobby, and something in his face changed. Not surprise, recognition, as if the thing he had half believed in during daylight had now become undeniable. "You ready?" he asked. Nora nodded. "Been ready." He turned and raised his voice toward the sidewalk. "If you need cooling, water, or medical support, come in orderly. Elderly first, kids next. If you need help walking, say so now." That was all it took. The invisible line broke. Pride gave way before heat did. Tessa came in carrying Micah, his cheek damp against her shoulder. An older couple followed, both red-faced and shaky. Then a pregnant woman from 2 blocks over. Then Raymond Pike, brought in by 2 neighbors with 1 oxygen tank and a battery pack clutched to his chest. The Marigold filled the way churches fill after tragedy. Quietly at first, then all at once. Inside, Nora moved with grounded, practiced focus. Not frantic, not dramatic. She directed families downstairs where the air was cooler. Put older folks near the strongest fans. Set children along the back wall with water and cooling towels. Sent Eli to hand out flashlights and help people find cots. When June arrived carrying sandwich bread, deli meat, and 3 coolers full of ice from the diner, Nora pointed her straight toward the makeshift food station without saying a word more than, "Thank you." No speeches, no time for them. Cal stayed near the entrance, keeping the flow steady, checking on names, making sure nobody got lost in the shuffle. And all through it, above the low rumble of fans and the engine outside, the town listened to a sound it had not heard in years inside the Marigold Theater. People depending on one another. Micah was breathing easier within 30 minutes. Tessa sat on the edge of a cot, one hand on his back, the other pressed over her own mouth like she was trying not to fall apart in public. She watched Nora cross the room with a box of supplies, stopping every few feet to answer a question, kneel beside someone, adjust a fan, hand over a bottle of water. There was no triumph in her face, no bitterness. None of the "I told you, so that would have been easy." Only concentration, only care. That, more than the generator or the lights or the cool basement air, is what broke something open in people. Because they had expected, if this day ever came, to find Nora vindicated. Instead, they found her useful, steady, tender in the plainest American way. By 10 o'clock, every cot downstairs was taken. By 10:30, people who had once laughed at the woman fixing a dead theater were carrying in extra chairs, blankets, and jugs of water from their own homes. The Marigold was no longer a strange project on Main Street. It was the safest place in Blackridge. And as the heat raged on outside and the dark sat heavy over the town, the old theater kept breathing, just like Nora knew it would. By morning, the worst of the heat still had not broken. The power was still out. The streets of Blackridge looked washed pale in the early light, quiet in that strange, hollow way a town gets after a long night of fear. But inside the Marigold Theater, people were still breathing easier. Children slept curled beneath light blankets on cots that had once seemed unnecessary. Older folks sat with paper cups of water in their hands, tired but steady. June Holloway moved through the room with a coffee urn that barely deserved the name coffee, offering it anyway because that is what people do in small American towns when they do not know how else to help. Deputy Cal Mercer stood near the front doors, sleeves rolled up, speaking in a low voice with the utility crew when they finally came through Main Street. And Nora Bennett, who had not slept more than a few minutes in a folding chair by the stage steps, was already checking supplies again as if this were just another task to finish before noon. That was the thing people would remember later. Not only that, she had been right, but that, after being mocked, doubted, and quietly dismissed, she had never once made the night about herself. She made it about keeping people alive. Around 10 that morning, the first bank of power came back on across the east side of town. A cheer rose outside somewhere down the block. Then another. By noon, the rest of Blackridge flickered back to life. Air conditioners rattled awake. Traffic lights blinked red, then green. Porch lights shut off one by one. And still, many people did not leave the Marigold right away. They lingered. Some because they were exhausted. Some because they were embarrassed. And some because stepping back into normal life meant facing what the night had made plain. The old theater had not been a foolish project. It had been a lifeline. Tessa Reed stood with Micah near the lobby doors, the little boy looking stronger now, color back in his face. She watched Nora coil an extension cord, then finally walked over. For a second, it looked like she might not know what to say. Then she said the truest thing she had. "I thought you were building a place to hide." Nora glanced up. Tessa swallowed hard and looked around at the cots, the water coolers, the tired people gathering their things. "But you were building a place for people to make it through." Nora let the cord rest in her hands. "Sometimes that's the same thing," she said quietly. "You just don't know it until other people need the shelter too." That line stayed with Blackridge. So did a lot of things after that. The jokes stopped. The sideways glances stopped. The lazy little comments people make when they think somebody else's pain has made them strange. Those stopped too. In the weeks that followed, folks came back to the Marigold for different reasons. Not because they had to, because they wanted to help. Dale Harper came with lumber in the bed of his truck and left it by the side door without much of a speech. June organized a shelf of emergency supplies and bullied half the town into donating canned food, batteries, and fans. Cal worked with Nora to put together a real heat emergency plan for Blackridge, one with names, addresses, ride lists, check-ins for seniors, and backup locations people could trust. And Eli Turner, skinny as ever, started showing up every afternoon with a notebook in his back pocket, learning how generators worked, how airflow mattered, how to prepare before people got desperate enough to listen. By fall, the Marigold Theater had changed again, not back into what it used to be, into something better. A community place, a backup shelter, a cooling center in summer, a warming center in winter, and on Friday nights when the world was kind enough to allow it, a place where families could sit together and watch old movies under a repaired ceiling that no longer leaked. The town had not been saved by money, or politics, or luck. It had been carried through by one quiet woman who refused to let a broken place stay broken just because everyone else had gotten used to it. And maybe that is the part worth holding on to. How many times do we laugh at the person who is preparing simply because we are not ready to admit they see something we do not? How many people around us are building hope in plain sight while the rest of us call it foolish? And if your town, your family, or your own life went dark tonight, would you be the one waiting for help, or the one who had quietly made room for others before they even knew they needed it? If this story touched you, tell us in the comments where you are listening from and what parts stayed with you the most. And if you believe stories like this still matter, subscribe to the channel, stay with us, and come back for the next one.